Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. Fun time had by all. I'm PD Rave, and I'm a at once community college dropout. And here with me is my crew, my team, my squad, my gang. We've got David.
Is the Record Breakers podcast like a book club for music, or is it just a book club for music?
Pretty much. I think book club for music, I guess, is the analogy.
Well, I mean, if it is, it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, if you will. We've got Drew.
So, and now I'm laughing because of Amber. Thank you.
Sorry.
And I lost the joke I was going to make. Coming to you straight from Peoria, Illinois. It's me.
Yes.
And I'm not.
And of course, last but not least, we've got Brett.
I was going to make a Conway Twitty joke, but then I was reminded that the Tourism Board of Peoria, Illinois, put advertisements to go to Peoria on St. Louis Cardinals games on KMOX radio, and they do it in the tune of The Killer's Human, but it's about Peoria. Or are you dancer? Yeah, it's terrible, and I can't find it on the internet. Peoria, using fake The Killers. It's beautiful.
Now
Yeah.
That went places.
And I want to go to Peoria, Illinois, because
That went places, and Peoria, Illinois was not one of them.
Yeah. We're here to talk about an album. We're here to talk about music. Very interesting album to dive into. The provider of the album is Drew. Drew, what have you got for us this week?
Well, this is a album that, like, almost didn't come out in some ways, was fought hard for by the artist to get it to come out. He was essentially snapped up because the beats and production work he was doing at the time was some of the best in the industry, and Rockefeller Records didn't want him doing anything for anybody else. And because of that, they kind of had to let him make an album, and that album sort of became this. It's a little bit controversial now, but it's Kanye West's The College Dropout is what I decided to bring.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about expectations. Brett, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
So at the time that this album came out, I was not in a place where this would be something that I would run into in the wild, except for I ended up later on hearing a lot of this in the wild, even though, like, Kanye, like, early on in, like, the first half of Kanye's career was a blind spot purely just because there's nobody to give me an exposure to Kanye. But then, like, the last half, I made a conscious decision after being told, like, you know, it probably, I have always heard about that old Kanye, and I'm happy to go back to the old Kanye. But I have a sticker around here from when I bought a T-shirt that says I miss the old Kanye, and I may have to have an opinion about that.
Yes. David, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
Do you want me to give my expectations when this album came out, or listening to this album again now?
Dealer's choice.
My expectations when this album came out were hearing word about this really good producer from Chicago by the name of Kanye West, who wanted to rap as well. So I was interested, and I had opinions on it. Fast forward to today, my opinions have not changed completely, but I do have a different perspective, a possibly controversial one regarding the narrative of, quote, the old Kanye, unquote.
But what was the distance? What was the time distance between this time listening to this Kanye and the last time you went out to listen to this Kanye?
Well, I've off and on listened to Kanye since really this album. I've always had a certain level of awareness of him.
This is a long time ago.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, this album in particular, at least a decade.
Yeah.
But it was always kind of in the back of my mind with him. I preferred Late Registration, but it is what it is.
That's not an invalid opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm very familiar with the with several of these songs, just because they've been in various places and used to be on the radio, and
Jesus
I would
walk.
listen. Yeah, Jesus walks with everywhere. But it was going to be interesting to sit down and listen to the presentation and the complete idea that is Kanye's first album. Let's talk about what this album is musically. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, musically is really weird to say, right? Because a lot of stuff at this time, before this album, that especially that Kanye was helping produce, had a very particular sound to it. And like I said in introducing this album, half the reason, or actually most or all of the reason that he was signed to Rockefeller Records was because the production work he was doing was astronomically good. The ear that Kanye West had at the time, it still does in some respects, but had especially at the time, for the samples that he used, and the way that he used them was something that was just, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, like unmatched. But he also wanted to say something, and he said a lot. This album musically has a lot of that, like, very, the kid singing or the chipmunk soul, like that sort of style to it, where you have these samples that are used in very interesting ways, in becoming and twisting into other things at the time, and we'll get into that, especially in one of my favorite songs of all time, possibly. But also the way that he dealt with things, like was said, he's from Chicago, and at the time it was a lot of party hip-hop, gangster rap, and he came in with his background that was very anti-materialistic, religious in a lot of ways, and wanted to speak on things that he felt was wrong, both within Chicago and within the greater talk about those things in the nation. And if you, in my opinion, you don't have that stuff, you don't have some of what became like alternative hip hop and quote unquote backpack rap later on. Things like Chance the Rapper, things like Childish Gambino don't happen, or they don't happen with the same prevalence, I think, without the College trilogy as it was. Where people get split up, the old Kanye, the new Kanye, I think that a lot of what he said on this album was, and when you talk about rap, you really have to talk about like what they're saying, because that's the point, right? There should be some sort of thought and goal behind the words. And what he was saying and what he was doing at this point, and pretty much everything I would say before Dark Twisted Fantasy, had a lot of like bringing people up, and a lot more positivity to it, that you don't get. And it was more like, this stuff is happening, this stuff is bad, it should be better by doing X. And I think he got a little bit away from that. That's personally how I feel. I know you might feel a little differently on that. And I hope that, and I think that's maybe a little bit due to some things that maybe happened in his life later on. You hear a lot about his mother, which played a pivotal point in his life on this album. She's no longer with us, and that may have changed from old Kanye to new Kanye. That might have.
That's that. I was going to ask, where was the line of demarcation? Like,
So
I'm going to talk
before the
about
South
that.
Park stuff, but
I'm going to talk
after
about that in my conclusive thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's educational for even those involved.
Yeah.
A lot of people point it differently as it uses as a Dark Twisted Fantasy and where it was. His mother died right before the Taylor Swift incident. Year before. There was a lot of alcohol that may have been involved. And I think there was a breaking point there. And his work ethic, which we'll get into in some of these songs, and those things all happening at once, his personal life being in shambles with the woman he was with for years and years and years, and then his mother dying, and then like being a public figure. After Dark Twisted Fantasy, he really went in a rabbit hole. But this album, I think it was a debut album. Late Registration, Dark Twisted Fantasy, I think has a little bit more meat on the bones. But why I like College Dropout is that he's saying the things and he's bringing those points up, like I said, like trying to be like, hey, like this is going on, and like saying those types of things, but doing it in a way that is almost like he's choosing his words very carefully to still fit in, quote unquote, with what was going on, while obviously, like, if you look at what he looked like at the time, did not fit in, quote unquote. So
Yeah. Brett, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, I'm just sitting thinking about how Drew says that lyrics have to say something, and I'm looking through digital undergrounds, you know, the Humpty Dance. It is saying so. No, it's it is poetry.
A good time can still be saying
do the Humpty Hump, Brett. What's the problem?
That's an important message.
I like my oatmeal lumpy.
He's trying to tell you, look at me. Look at him. He's ugly.
Yes, he's telling. But yes, this is definitely. Yes, when I bring Digital Underground as my references, you know I'm the hip hopist of the group. But no, the lyrics, like constructively as it goes, this is a very consumable album, because you don't have to have a lyric sheet and catch what's going on or see where the cleverness of the hooks are. This is weird. This is ancient to me. This is a completely different music industry. So like, it's also a little bit of that. So they have a lot of effects on vocals. That's a thing that was used a lot. There's some things that I forgot about songs that are very popular that include some auto tuning used in a very strange way. But there's a lot of that. It's story time. It's like documentary poetry done to a beat. Sometimes the samples are a little bit it's the poppy and the crackly, and it's the warbly lo-fi kind of stuff going on mixed in with other stuff. It's 2000, it's that time, but it's completely different. It's that kind of recording technique. But like, if I think about like what hip hop was in the time this album came out, like Too Fast, Too Furious was the year before. Like, this seems like this is not as dated. That was one thing I wrote down from the beginning. There's some lyrical content that's a little dated, and some speak of the industry and some sounds that are like, okay, everybody kind of does some of this these days. But if I think about what was coming out of like other places at the same time, that you go back and you're like, whoo, they don't do that anymore. The only time I said they don't do that anymore was some of the lyrics in this, but overall, like, I can completely understand like the way that words were put into song, the way that things sort of go their own path. It's not like a set song structure. There's a lot of rule breaking. There's a lot of little in between interstitial tracks, which check box I'm into. People doing voices on a hip hop album. Yeah. It got the point across. I believe he has an opinion about the like post-high school education system.
Yes.
And he said it in a very interesting way with skits.
Yes, with skits. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this album musically as an autobiographical album, an autobiographical hip-hop concept album in 2004 by the best beat maker at the time, because that's what he was. But as he talks about later in this album, which I will get to in my conclusive thoughts, he was only known as a beat maker and as a producer at the time. And this is kind of the tale of his journey. And you hear what I think is a very formative Kanye West album that became the man that we know in the year 2021. This is very much not necessarily the musician, but the man, Kanye West.
Yeah. It kind of sets that up. It's him putting himself, finally getting his words out there. He's always been the guy putting music for other people's words, putting other people's music for other people's raps. I mean, had been doing it since like the mid '90s, so like under a decade. Roughly. It's interesting to kind of like go from where, even from when they allegedly started recording this album, or at least like formally started recording this album, because you like when he first started beat making, the mid '90s, that was like the late stage afterward gangster rap transition out.
They put the 808 and the sine wave away about 1996.
Yeah. 808s and Heartbreaks is like 4 albums.
Yeah.
But the sine wave, you got to have that with it.
Yeah. And then the late 90s was the glitz and glamour, pomp and circumstance, hip hop, and early 2000s as well. And then like
Pink. Sorry.
Yes. And then like early 2000s was that, but like I mean, you got a lot of the hood rich style of hip hop early 2000s.
A lot of Ludacris and Ludacris adjacent was going on in about 2001.
I think it gets referenced, like big jerseys, like the fact that like he would have trouble getting signed, like he like sites, like he's not walking around in a jersey, like because he was dressing in sweaters and shirts and stuff like that, and like a preppy kid. Or at least that's what his look and his gimmick was at the time. But it introduces some sounds that he'd already been introducing. The sped up soul sound and things like that. He had already been introducing, but then like the approach to hip hop that he, not single handedly, because I think there was like. It was him and several other rappers, including people that featured on this album, that all kind of brought what was the mid 2000s hip hop, even if it wasn't always the mainstream, which was more clever, more personal, more conscious, but not all the time. And I think that this is that first, or like that early clarion call, but the main thing is that this is Kanye West's. This is, you have to think about it, like this is Kanye West spending like 5 years telling his story, all compressed into one album. So it's like it's a fascinating thing because there's like 5 years worth of like work all into one album. Which is not uncommon for a debut album of somebody finally getting to like put all their work. Like, I have all this music,
and I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to put it out again.
Yeah,
you have the whole
debut.
Life. Your whole life to work on your first album.
Yes, and he decided, he needed to be like the one that would soon to be known as Brian Cage and get his shit in, like, and I think it's a fascinating observation, and it has hits that you'll know, has features that are fantastic, including several people that, at least a couple of people that were a huge part of my hip hop life and my hip hop journey of the mid 2000s, which I think has been documented on this podcast.
We're gonna have a film of Petey's journey through hip hop.
Yes,
starting with the 2 Live Crew cassette tape in childhood, all the way to.
Gone
it starts with Salt and Pepper is very necessary.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, all the way back in there.
So when do we get to Petey listening to Tech Nine?
I don't know.
Before or after we do a house.
Yes. But yeah, let's talk about key tracks. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks to zero in on?
Well, after the intro, you have We Don't Care. The claps, the kids singing, like the beat behind it, feels to me like Brett was saying there are parts of this that like don't date it. I feel like that dates a little bit. But then there's the message behind it, what he's talking about, the community as a whole. The message at that time really, like we were kind of alluding to, the sort of party hip hop and stuff like that, just kind of poking holes in it a little bit. Jesus Walks was the thing that, like, once that started getting in front of the people that were pulling the strings at Rockefeller, was the thing that, like, got him pushed out. Like, he kind of pushed that to, like, make people notice. And it's one that's a classic. Like I sort of interjected, it was everywhere for a while. And you talk about autobiographical, like, this one is one of those songs that, like, says it. Deej alluded to the autobiographical concept that, like, especially the College series was, and then Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is why I don't like 808s and Heartbreaks, but that's a different conversation. The new Workout Plan. That was, like, the pop song. That was the single. That was the thing, right? Like, that was, you could almost hear it in, like, oh, hey, we need something that, like, hip-hop radio can play after the new Ludacris song. What are we going to do? Okay, got it. Bingo. But, yes. Through the Wire. Through the Wire is still one of my top 5 all-time songs in the genre. The fact that, like, the work ethic that he had, I think, may have partially been his downfall later. Not allowing himself time to grieve properly, I think could be part of it. But it created this. Dude had his mouth wired shut, was in the hospital, and still was like, nah, I got things to say about literally the thing that just happened, and I need to say them now, or I might never get to say them. And I think that is commendable in some ways, created something that I think was beautiful in a lot of ways, and painful to listen to, but beautiful to listen to. Just an amazing song from front to back.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
All Falls Down. This is I want to. Nothing new is going to be said about this album by any of us, but the ones that the tracks that I could piece apart in the way that I could consume, like it was, like All Falls Down is a pretty fantastically put together song. Jesus Walks was everywhere for like ever, probably still is. But like no matter how many times I've heard it, like I had listened to this album, had a little break, came back to listen to this album because of reasons that we couldn't record, and then I come back, and every time I play, I swear to God, I forget that auto-tuned vocals being used kind of like a saxophone. Like it's great. Spaceship. Working in the mall sucks. The new workout plan reiterates, ain't got to work at the mall again. Shopping malls, 2004. Like, things that lyrically, yes, it takes you back to a time that isn't anymore. But also, new workout plan. Those are some lyrics. That's not since I've party rocked have I thought about lyrics. There's a lot of in this when there's a theme. There's a lot of transactional relationships.
I think nowadays the kids would call that song problematic.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are problematic. Now let's go to slow jams. Never gonna think about, like, of course this is another thing that's been put in front of my face, but every time I hear the Michael Jackson lines, I'm like, all right, you got me. This, like, you're taking me back to a time when people wrote lyrics a little bit differently. But like the thing that actually stuck with me most was like Last Call, like, because it is like autobiographical and it is a slice in time, like talked into a microphone into a machine, and it's been like 2 decades almost, and talking about a music industry that was at the time dying. Like, I don't think, like, you got to take yourself back to 2003, 2004. Like, the music industry was fucked. It is not what it used to be. You do not come up through the music industry and in this way at all anymore. And it's like, the breaking down, like how hard it was to just get somebody to hear your stuff and get it out and into the masses, like, is a completely different way of putting music out than they do now. And to think that he was doing that all the way back before they were putting music onto computers regularly, like the digital recording stuff, man, it's such a weird transitional time, the early 2000s, and it like makes me just want to know more. But like there were so many fewer people in control of what music got out to people, and like having a song that explains just how rare it is for somebody to get a chance to put out something, whether it's good or bad, like whether they have merit for it or not. Like, it's kind of neat.
Right. It is that weird time where the democratization of making music was happening, where like more people from more walks of life were being able to start making it, but the people who were still like pulling the strings were still few and far between. So it was like
but they knew they were fucked because of Napster.
Yeah.
And iTunes was just about ready to come out.
They're just going to be able to like put out the things that they want, and like anybody can hear it. We've got to stop this.
The internet can share music. Yeah.
I forgot to mention on Through the Wire, the Shaka Khan sample. That is all.
Yeah. Duly noted. Thank you.
Shaka.
There's
Damn
more
it, you
to Shaka
beat me
Khan.
to it. Damn it.
There is more to Shaka Khan than saying Shaka Khan twice.
Yes.
But
there's a lot more.
Also,
yes.
There's a lot more.
Well, I'm gonna put a note down. We may come back to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, again, those are the tracks. But like Last Call stuck with me because it's like I can see being in like 2004, 2005, popping this disc into your Chevy Cavalier and having your mind blown because you've never heard anything quite like this.
Also, a random factoid: SoundCloud was founded in 2007, like 3 years after this album.
Wow,
that's wild. David,
Brockhampton.
David, what would be your key tracks to zero in on?
Spaceship, especially GLC's verse. I think he really killed that one. KILT killed. Slow Jams, I think for me that was kind of the standout track of this album. Breathe In, Breathe Out. I listened to this one and I think to myself, I wonder what Ludacris and Kanye in 2021 would think when they hear this song from 2004. That's what I think about. Also, the song Two Words, simply because of Yasin Bey, aka Mos Def, the legend, the god Mos Def. He kills this one as well because Mos Def is an icon.
Yes.
He's fucking.
Yes.
Most fucking.
Yeah. Yes. Tracks. Spaceship was fun.
Yes,
all
Petey, tracks.
Yes. All of them tracks, bruh. I would say, yeah, things like Get 'Em High. I love hearing anytime I can Talib Kweli in Common, but especially Talib Kweli. I've featured a couple albums with him on them. Either the
Honestly,
main act.
folks, we were just saying in our Record Breakers chat if we've brought Black Star onto this podcast, and my answer is, do we even need to bring Black Star? Because it's a goat hip hop. It is. Do we even need to? Do we even need to?
It's one of those. It's like it would be the shortest episode. It's great.
You got two smart dudes doing smart things.
Yes. But yeah, that one is a fun track. That one is a fun hit track, and it's catchy. I wanted to give shout out to School Spirit mainly because it is odd to hear this censored track in the middle of this uncensored album, and then I look into it and realize, oh yeah, it's because Auntie Aretha don't want none of that cussing.
Yes.
No swearing.
No swearing. And you know
Watch your profanity.
Look,
if Auntie Aretha says no swearing, you say there's no swearing.
If they say you can't use my song unless you wash your mouth.
No swearing.
Exactly. And of course, Most Def on 2 Words is just fantastic. And Most Def in a lot of things is fantastic. And you know what? Twista wasn't too bad on Slow Jams. You know, he did his thing. He wasn't too bad there. You know, he did his thing. And of course, Jamie Foxx. This is peak. Hey, Jamie Foxx. This is like peak. Jamie Foxx saying, "Hey, I can sing. I'm not just a funny dude. I can sing." And like doing this.
And then everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he can."
Like,
and then like,
see?
Here you go. You're going to be able to retire now, and
yes, and
only
then he went on to be one of
hero
the
movies.
Yes.
No, I'm gonna win an Oscar too.
Yes,
I'm just gonna do Ray Charles, win an Oscar.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a billion awesome things from now and just be one of the best actors. It's like
I'm gonna do so much stuff that people are like. Remember when I did stuff with Kanye?
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember when I was on In Living Color?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Like Jesus.
It's still fantastic. If you ever host, I was thinking about like bringing in random In Living Color characters when he ever hosts SNL would be hilarious.
I mean, I'm all for the Wayans getting back to like old characters, but now as old men. Like,
yes,
they tried that on HBO a few years ago. Didn't take.
Yeah. All right. Let's go back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. Let's bring it around the horn like the Fuego del Sol. Around the horn, Brett.
Talking about
King of the Master of the Tornado.
Pardon the interruption.
Mobile, Alabama's greatest luchador. Brett, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
I mean, I definitely understand a lot more because I've actually listened to this album front to back and not just heard singles, and barely listened to the singles. Now that I'm familiar with it, I can kind of see how, like, you know, with my hindsight as somebody who was paying attention to music at the time, like, yeah, this is different. This is something. And there's a lot of this that's in a lot of other things. So I can see how important this album is, especially, you know, it's the start of something that has become something much different. But it is the beginning. But like, yeah, I can see the appeal. It's not really my kind of thing, nor, you know, is it expected to be. But yeah, I'm glad that I know it a little better. It answers some questions.
Mm-hmm. David, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I'm just gonna blow the entire narrative of old Kanye, new Kanye out of the water, because this album, while, like I said, it is a autobiographical hip hop concept album, and in my opinion, in a lot of places, it is legitimately brilliant. The Kanye that we know today has always been there, and he was here on this album. It shows Kanye's intergalactic levels of self-obsession right from the beginning. The dude is telling his entire story on this album. Even when he was, quote, old Kanye, unquote, he was still unbelievably obsessed with himself. Kanye is and always has been his own muse. He has been telling you from the very beginning his life is dope and he does dope shit. Always. He's always been this guy. It's only now that it's more out there. But you hear it on this album if you're listening. Last Call is not a testimony. Last Call isn't even a humble brag. It's just a full-on straight-up fucking brag. He is bragging about how he was able to pull all of this off and telling you, yeah, and that's the story of how I got signed and made this album that you just listened to. I'm Kanye West. My life is dope and I do dope shit. It is every bit as self-indulgent and masturbatory as any guitar solo that goes a few measures too long. It's every bit. It's exactly the same. But the album is as good as advertised. Because in my opinion, Jesus Walks is actually one of the weaker songs on this album. And when the single is one of the weaker tracks, you got a winning album. Period. But it's still every bit as self-indulgent and self-obsessed as Kanye West ever was. But it's good.
Yes.
I would like to think that there's a lot of hip hop from every era that is masturbatory and
Yes.
self-indulgent.
Yeah.
But this one is like
But
Yes.
but let's stop pretending that Kanye never
he's living the
was that.
gimmick.
See, when I think of old versus new Kanye, like, my thing is, oh yeah, no, he was always like, no, I'm smart as hell. Like, I'm awesome as hell. I do cool shit. Like, these dudes have had me, like, not able to release this record because they signed me just so, like, I could make them look better.
I'm too
Like,
good
I'm
for
that
them
guy.
to let loose.
Like, he's always
Yeah.
been that dude. The
Yeah.
thing to me that, like, breaks it down is, like, there was, like, the output and what he's been doing and how he's been doing it lately. Like, when you release an album and then pull an album because, and as the podcast was named, he's gonna fix wolves. Like, because it wasn't good enough after people didn't like it on, what was it, like Saturday Night Live or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, when he was,
This is 5 years before Twitter was even a thing. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's, the self-absorption was him recognizing, like, I'm important, like, listen to me, and going, I'm important, I should have it all. That, I think, was sort of the switch. And, like, I don't want him to be less grandiose. I don't, like,
You just want him to fix those wolves.
Yes.
want
All
him
right. I would say
about, like, you know, the thing that happened yesterday. Like,
Yeah.
that's the song I want to hear out of Kanye, and I don't think I'm going to hear that anymore.
no.
It's the thing that makes,
Yeah, and it's so this album is a fascinating dig into it is a fascinating exploration of Kanye's propulsion and self-propulsion into finally becoming a rapper and a performer. And it is it is like David has said, it is a concept album about his life and his career, and it works, and it a lot of this sets up a lot of things, especially if you're going forward for his albums and for the music industry and for where he goes for the next couple albums and like where he goes for his like future career. And it is fun to go back to and listen to it at least once. If anything, I would say you can listen to the whole thing once and then maybe go back and listen to it and maybe just skip all the skits and like
That's most hip hop albums.
Yeah, that's most hip hop albums, but especially this one. But like there's some like really fantastic beats, really fantastic bars, and it's fun to kind of like see the beginning of what he had set up with the College Dropout. But yeah, last but not least, I know you already got quite a bit out there. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
This album is something where I feel like Kanye now has a lot of baggage, both politically, with his interview style, shall we say, who may or may not have answers, has become a joke, and for good reason. I think part of that, like I've said before, may have something to do with the people he lost at very specific times. But this album, the College trilogy, as it were, I think is, yes, it's grandiose. Yes, it's masturbatory. Yes, it is a lot of smelling your own farts, if we were to do the South Park reference from this time, I think. But there's good stuff to say, said by a smart dude that can make good music. And it's, if nothing else, it is an interesting slice in time to see, like, if you now like alternative rap and hip hop, and you like conscious hip hop, because you hear a lot more of that in a more mainstream sense. This is kind of the start of that. This was the first that I can remember big one to come out after like the 2000s that was like trying to say something more than just like, yo, I got I'm going to like the jewelers. I forget the dude's name that like did all the chains for all the dudes. That was always referenced.
The guy was on Def Jam Fight for New York.
Yeah.
I forget.
Yeah, he was in the video game.
In this album, and now I can't remember his name. But like, I'm going to see that dude, and I've got a gold tank, and blah 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 blah. And there's a time and a place for that. I'm not too good to throw them bows and talk about area codes, but this was trying to say a little more than that. And I think it achieved that in a way that's still fun to listen to. Sometimes you listen to that sort of stuff and it's like, taking a bit of medicine. This is still like, you can put on this album, have a good time, and you can put on this album and be like, oh, that's fucked up. The kids are dealing drugs in Chicago. Like that. Oh. And have both experiences in the same album. So.
Drew, would it shock you? Oh, sorry, Petey.
I was gonna say I believe the gentleman we're talking about is Jacob the Jeweler Arabo.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jacob the Jeweler. That is correct.
I wanted to make a note. If believe it or not, it has been longer from today to this album coming out than this album coming out and the Back to the Future movie. So like this is literally the same amount of time between Milo Goes to College and me being in 2001 picking the album up.
It's been almost a decade since the Aaron joke on Keenan. Want to feel old?
Yeah. Yes. Old Kanye.
Then made me remember Balake, which is still funny.
Yes.
Jay Quellen.
Jay Quellen.
Damn it, those motherfuckers are funny as fuck.
I was thinking about that today as well. That fucking lasted. That stuck.
Chicaners in the sequel. But yeah, those are our thoughts on
About Aaron.
Be nice.
Kanye West. Kanye West, the College Dropout. Now we get to the main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for. Our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up with the 575 poetic forms. Having this bit live for 5 years at this point. 6 years.
Yeah, I remember there was a time we talked about it and we were like, maybe we'll do this for a while and then we'll come up with something else.
No, we're just gonna do this forever. Yes.
It's so funny.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Forever, ever?
Haiku numero uno. Brett, what is your haiku?
It's that old Kanye. A blind spot personally. This explains a lot.
Yes. David, what is your haiku?
Old Kanye was good. Can we just leave it right there? I'm so tired, man.
Yes. My haiku. Yeezy forged his path to fame and then infamy. These were better times. Drew, what is your haiku?
Fingers crossed for Mike Myers references.
Yes.
A classic album. Changing the game with this one. I miss old Kanye.
Yes. Those are our thoughts on.
But Kanye was always Kanye.
Yes.
That's the point.
Those
was
are
never
thoughts.
old Kanye.
There's our thoughts on the College Dropout. You can of course find the album on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. Follow along at home. We have both of the links to the playlist, both Record Breakers, the home game, and Record Breakers, the playlist. One of them has the episodes included. One of them doesn't. Just a nice variety for everyone. On those Spotify playlists will be next week's record. Yes, it will be on there. It's gonna be an interesting album. I mentioned them my last turn when we talked about a subject to change as being kind of like their Instagram being how I found out, like by virtue of them I found out about that album. I figured, why not bring them on? It's going to be a band out of New York City that describes themselves as, quote, Bad Brains meets Foo Fighters in a black woman's hair salon for a cup of tea, end quote. We're going to be talking about the 1865 and their album Don't Tread on We. So look forward to that. That'll be next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is at XTruciferX. Brett is at HibbittyBibbert, HIBBITYBIBBRD. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com, RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com, Rebelli.net for listen to other shows, Rebelli TV on YouTube and on Twitch. We're streaming at least 4 days a week. Check the schedule on there. I also post it on Twitter. Like, share, subscribe. Find us everywhere you find podcasts, like Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, all the places. Do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Rebelli Podcast, baby.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.